This is a guide on how to install the NVIDIA drivers for Arch Linux. It was very hard for me to do it. It took me more than a week. I had to reinstall my computer maybe about 4 times, but I managed to do it. I troubleshooted a lot of errors. I had booting issues, but the important thing is I managed to do it. I even was contemplating to switching back to Windows, thinking that the NVIDIA support is so bad that it's impossible, but it actually is possible, and I'll test it out with NVIDIA. And here we can see the NVIDIA is loaded. I can even test it with Vulkan. And everything is working correctly. So how did I did it? I'll tell you the 2 most important things you should follow. The first advice is that the guide is your number 1 friend. Whatever the guide tells you, it is gospel. The second most important advice is to have backups. I have backups. I'm using Timeshift for backups. As you can see, I've made a lot of backups. I can go back to the fresh install of the window manager. But here is my latest backup of installing the drivers. This is the most important step, to have backups and to have a USB device where you have installed a Linux distribution. I have installed Linux Mint because it has a graphical interface and Timeshift is already set up there. I just have to open it and it figures out it finds where my snapshots are, and I can just hit restore and everything is back to normal. I've had a lot of times where I had troubles booting the system. This happens very often, and the problem is so bad that even the console doesn't load. So you would have to go into a live USB, and the situation is very desperate if you don't have backups. It's the most important step. I cannot stress this enough. Once you have backups, next we go back to the guide. So as the guide says, for every person is different, because every computer has a different NVIDIA card. And this command is to check this command checks on what graphic cards you have. This is my main one, and this is probably the for the integrated one from the processor. So the system recognizes that I have the graphics card connected, but there are still no drivers in your case. Next, to determine the driver version, it says to go to the NVIDIA website and to pick whichever your card is. And the version it says on the NVIDIA website for me is this one, but this step I haven't used it. I haven't seen why I would need it. I have I think that maybe it's to check if the version we have downloaded from Pacman is the same as here. Because we are not going to download from here, the guide advises to use Pacman. And it's maybe to check if the versions is the correct one. Next is to install the driver. Here are different scenarios. Here it says for the this version. And what does this version mean? The NV110. These are code names. And here we can see each graphics card. I just clicked here and it loads the code names. And you have to find your graphics card. I found mine here and it's in this family name. It's 170. And in it here it says 110 and newer. So I fall into this category. Alternatively, if you have from 160 and newer, you can install the NVIDIA Open package. So what's the difference? The NVIDIA package is I think it's called the proprietary one. And the open one is the open source one. But the open source one, if I understand correctly, has a lot of issues, and it's better to install the standard one. Even here they say that it's alpha quality and there are some issues on the internet. So probably the best case is the NVIDIA package. There's also NVIDIA DKMS, I think it's dynamic kernel, etc, etc. It's for different kernels. Most likely you have the Linux kernel. I have the Linux kernel, so the NVIDIA package is for me. But some people have the Linux LTS kernel. So what is this kernel? When you have installed Arch Linux, guide, at this step, installing essential packages, while we have installed Arch Linux, we have set to install the base, Linux and Linux firmware. Most people are with the Linux kernel, but some people have installed Linux LTS and they have to use NVIDIA LTS package. But most people will install the NVIDIA package. And for older cards, there are other sections. For example, in the code names, maybe you have older card family than the 110. But there is a problem if we go and install it straight away. Before installing the NVIDIA package, we have to upgrade the system. Well, in my case, I had to upgrade it because the NVIDIA driver that is installed, this one, it wanted me to have Arch 1-2, and I had Arch 1-1, so it was incompatible with my kernel version, so I had to upgrade. Before upgrading, make backup using Timeshift Launcher. That is what I'm using. Using Timeshift Launcher, make a backup before making the upgrade. I made a backup, it's when I installed the Vulkan. And after I made the upgrade, I made another backup before installing the NVIDIA driver. Let me go over installing Timeshift very quickly. Timeshift is an AR package. It is not, you cannot find it with sudo pacman timeshift. It is not found. It's an AR package. You have many options of installing AR packages, AUR. And there are a lot of tutorials on the internet. Some people use, I think, EA, I use that too. There are also other ways you can manually install it. I think there are even guides on that. In a sense, I use the repos folder, and here I have downloaded Yay. It's also a package. Like Timeshift, it's also a package, and after you install this package, it is easy to install other AR packages. It is like pacman, where in pacman you say sudo pacman s and the package name. You just use Yay, yes, and Timeshift. And now it's easy to install AR packages. But there is a manual way to install them, and if you choose Yay, for Yay you will see the manual way. I'm not going to go through installing AR packages, but because there are many tutorials already. So after creating a backup, we need to upgrade the system. And once again, the Arch Linux guide is your best friend when trying to figure out what to do. And in the system, for upgrading the system, here you can see a lot of warnings to check out information about the newest version, if there are problems, if you have to do some interventions. But basically, and also they state that you should never run pacman sy, and I was surprised because I have done that before, and that's why I'm glad I started reading the guides, because there are a lot of helpful advices like that I would have never seen. So for upgrading the system, we need to do pacman -syu. And after the upgrade of the system, I rebooted my computer. Before and after, I have created a snapshot, and then I move on to installing the NVIDIA package, which is with sudo pacman NVIDIA, and I've already installed it. But for some people that may be enough, but for me that wasn't enough. It still wasn't recognized. I was writing NVIDIA what was the command? Yes, I was writing this command, and it was saying that it couldn't find the NVIDIA card. And not only this command, but many other commands that needed the NVIDIA drivers, it still wasn't working out for me. Many people would say that this would be enough, but for my case it was absolutely not enough. Next, I had to edit the configuration file that's located in here. This configuration file, and here you would see in the hooks, you would see the KMS. Let me find it. Whole words. Remove KMS from hooks. And right about here you would find the KMS. And what I did, I deleted it. And in the modules, I added these 4 modules here in the guide. They also talked about these modules. Here you can add these modules. And after that, a command is needed to run this command for because we have edited the configuration, but we have to generate some files in order to use this configuration. So we start this command, and there shouldn't be any errors when you start this command. If there are errors, it's time for troubleshooting and to resolve those errors. But there shouldn't be errors at this point. Keep in mind, this tutorial is just guidance and what worked for me. Like, your case may be a lot different than mine, but if you're kind of desperate, if you have tried many different results, I'm just sharing what worked finally for me after a week of trying different solutions. So I did all of that, but it also wasn't enough for my case. For my case, I had to do something one last step, and it has to do with this property. We have to set this property, and here is a description what happens. Basically, it says when we're booting, for the kernel to wait a bit until we have loaded X, until X is loaded. Like, I'm not completely I don't completely understand everything in details. I just managed to have my NVIDIA drivers working, and I'm sharing what worked for me. So how to set this up? For setting it up, I edited the grub file, and here this is what I've added. So this will usually is not here, it's like that. I've added it, you save it, and after saving it, then we have to generate the file, the config file for grub. And it should be with this command, at least for me. Now, after doing that, it's time for a reboot, and a quick check after rebooting if everything is loaded correctly is to check modules that have been loaded. Like, the easiest check is like I showed you with this command. But to check if modules are loaded correctly, we see that the appropriate modules are loaded. And to check if Noveo is not loaded, it should be completely empty. So a few important things I should mention once more. You've noticed that most commands I didn't run, so maybe I have missed something, maybe some commands are not perfect. You shouldn't be following what I'm doing without checking the guide, without being completely sure for each command. But even if you decide to follow this guide completely, if you have backups, there won't be any issues, because if you go back to your backup, it should be as when you started the tutorial. And also keep in mind that it's completely possible for the system to stop booting, to break the system. It's completely possible following this tutorial. Like I said, I troubleshooted for more than 7 days. I had many issues. I had to start over when I didn't have backups. I had to start over installing Arch Linux once more. But I finally managed to do it, and after adding snapshots, I stopped needing to restart everything from the beginning. And I followed many other guides. They are literally guides that say that you should just install the package, the NVIDIA package. They are literally guides that tell you for Arch Linux, just install this NVIDIA package and you should be fine. And there are other guides that tell you you should install more packages, that you should do other things, but in my case, this is what worked. And I would have liked if there was a video like this one. So follow guides, follow the Arch Linux guides, make backups, and you should be fine. If you have errors, just Google search and troubleshoot. Like, most likely you will find problems while installing it on your machine. And like, it's almost certain that you will find some kind of an error. I showed you how I did it and what worked for my case, but for your case, you may need to do other steps. And I may have did some steps wrong because I just went over the steps as I remembered them, because it's normal if I have missed some parts. I should have documented the journey on what exactly I did to make it work, to be completely sure each step is correct that I'm sharing, but I think that this is better than nothing. Like, so this is the tutorial. I hope that this was helpful for you, and I hope that whatever next I try to install, it doesn't take more than 7 days. Also, one other thing, if you have dual monitors, multiple displays, I had configured them on the terminal with configuration files, but after installing NVIDIA, it was all changed. Like, I've lost my configuration of the dual monitors. And what I had to install that helped my situation was NVIDIA settings. And once you've installed NVIDIA settings, you can see this easy configuration, because here is simple with a graphical interface, but setting up the displays, for me, it took me about 1 to 2 days. Like, it took me a lot of time to set up the displays with configuration files. But after installing the NVIDIA driver, that configuration was lost, and I didn't knew how to configure it with the NVIDIA drivers. But it turns out you just need NVIDIA settings, and at the display configuration, it's an easy drag and drop. Hit apply, and the setup is complete. Because the problem was that my display was on the right side, but it's actually on the left in my case. This is the guide. I don't have anything else for the tutorial. Just on the personal note, for this channel, I want to share that I installed Vulkan because I am on a journey on creating my own game engine. I've installed Vulkan and followed a tutorial. For those that are interested. Vulkan. And here is my project. I'm following a guide right now, and right now, if I go to the shell and start up the application, right now it's just a window. It's just a window, a lot of code just for one window. It's a very slow process. For this month I'm planning to make a game in 30 days, but I'm not sure how this will happen because with Vulkan it's a very slow process to progress. But hopefully I'll be able to make even a simple 3D game by the end of the 30 days, which should be on 15th of August. Okay, thank you for watching. This video got quite long, and see you in the next video.